Hi everyone! Long time no see! It's been such a long time since I've made a painting video, and I finally have some time to sit down and record this one for you guys. A lot of stuff has happened over the last couple of months, and I've been really busy and really distracted by life events and with freelance work, but I'll update you guys on that in a vlog later. But for this video, I'm going to share with you guys my thought process behind this painting, which is the July Patreon print reward. So if you sign up within the month of July, you'll get this illustration as a print along with a sticker that will accompany this piece. So, hi, hello. We're painting now. I hadn't painted in such a long time that it actually took me a little while to kind of get used to using traditional media. My initial mistake, like I have already made a mistake at this point. So the mistake that I made here was that I drew this piece on a cold press watercolor block instead of the hot press watercolor block that I have. So originally I wanted to do this in watercolor, but for some reason I decided last minute as I was painting that I was gonna use Acryla Gouache and just paint thickly. So here I am struggling to get in all of the little white gaps that is caused by the texture of the paper, which would have been fine if I used a more runny medium like watercolor like I was supposed to, but instead I'm using Acryla Gouache. So at this point I'm just laying down a decent skin tone all around. I was really struggling to find a good starting point, and so that's why I started with the legs, because it was just like one surface area that I could just keep painting and paint over if I didn't like the color. Because I definitely had not painted in a really long time, I had to sort of relearn in like 5 minutes how to mix paint and mix colors again, because if you don't practice you lose your skills, and that's literally what was happening to me. So from here I start adding in the darks just a little bit here and there and blending it out so that I don't lose all of my pencil drawing. So I go in with this darker color and I draw in like the facial details and also kind of line art or draw over any of the pencil edges that I would want in the paint color. I think I remember why the reason I decided to last minute switch to Acryla Gouache was because I sketched directly onto the watercolor block instead of drawing and transferring my image. So I had a lot of like sketchy marks and eraser marks that I just wanted to paint over. So hence an opaque paint makes sense, so I can just kind of hide all of my construction lines and messy drawing lines. So this piece was really inspired by vintage ads and vintage food packaging. So I really tried to keep the color palette like really minimal by only using primary or variations of primary colors. So I used like a wine red, like a yellow ochre kind of a color, and then two different blues. I used like a dark navy and like a kind of a more muted pastel grayish blue as my main colors, and then using those colors I would mix and then just stay within a very specific color gamut. I would make colors darker by mixing in the wine red with any of the other colors to bring it back, or I would just mix all of the colors to kind of like make a gray or like whatever. I don't know what I'm saying, but I hope this kind of makes sense. I'm literally just kind of like rambling about how I mix paint at this point. But that's how I went about choosing the color palette for this, by literally restricting myself to like 4 different tubes of paint and then just mixing to get the colors in between. And I feel like this is something that I struggle with digital painting because the color gamut is so big and endless, and there's so many possibilities that I just kind of get lost in like color picking off of like a rainbow of just colors. So when it comes to traditional painting, I feel like I have a stronger sense of color just because I'm so restricted with the color gamut, the saturation, and the brightness. So with that, I feel like I can experiment a little bit more by adding different hues of like greens and blues into certain areas. Like this skirt, for example, I decided to lighten it up with like a grayish green blue as like a fun highlight kind of a thing, and to get some texture. And I feel like I can do that here because all of the colors make sense with each other, because a little bit of each color is mixed in with each other, that it makes it a little bit more harmonious. Whereas if I were to do this digitally, I felt like I would struggle a lot with like trying to experiment with putting different colors in different areas of shadow and all of that, just because I feel so like intimidated by the giant color gamut that I don't know how to restrict myself. Even with like a restricted color palette through digital painting, like I struggle with like, you know, balancing the saturation and the brightness, and like making sure my darks are dark and that my lights are light, and having to check my values and all that stuff. So my painting process is kind of all over the place. I get really distracted, and I think my ADHD shows a little bit in my painting process. So usually what you would probably want to do is lay down flat color and then go into rendering. But as you can see, for me, I'm still like mixing colors as I go, and I'm still like picking and choosing. But in between like laying down flat color, I'm like rendering like halfway. So like I like half rendered the face and like half rendered the hands, but went into the uniform, and then I started half rendering the uniform and then playing around with the skirt, and then now I'm going in the hair with like two different like tones of brown. So I've got like a cool brown on the underside and then a warm brown on the outside. The painting looks like a little bit chaotic at this point, like especially the hair. I'm looking at it now in the playback and I'm like, wow, why is the bottom half warm and the main body of the hair so cool? I end up knocking down the inside portions of her hair with a really dark shadow so that the values make sense. But at this stage, I'm still like just kind of picking and choosing colors and rendering every now and then. I think I also just kind of render and do flats based on like what colors I have mixed on my palette, just because out of sheer laziness of not wanting to wash my brush every time I change colors, I'll just kind of jump here and there to whatever. So like for example here, like I mixed so much brown for the hair that I just decided, okay, I'll just go in and do the shoes the same color so that I don't have to mix more or wash the brush in between. I'm definitely a lot more organized when it comes to digital painting, despite being a little bit weak in digital painting. There's kind of like a step-by-step process for like digital, where it's like, you know, you fill the figure with a silhouette of one flat color and you paint on top of it with like a clipping mask, and then you add the shadows and all that stuff. Whereas here, you know, I'm jumping back from putting down flats and doing details. If you know me, I really suck at doing backgrounds or coming up with backgrounds, so I usually end up with a character on like a white plane or flat color. But this time around, I decided to do something really fun and really jump on this vintage theme, so much so that I'm using kind of old tools. So this tool that I'm using right here is called a ruling pen, and I actually lost my just regular ruling pen. This is actually a ruling pen on a compass, and this thing's really cool. I learned how to use it in an illustration class back in community college, and my illustration teacher showed us how you can make straight lines with paint, particularly gouache, with the ruling pen, and make really crisp lines, and it's super handy. But the whole inspiration behind the background was, like I had explained earlier, based on vintage packaging and like vintage advertisements. So I was browsing the Pinterest and I was looking at old like magazine ads or like painted ads for like food, or illustrations for columns in an article. And it was really fun to like browse and like kind of get a feel for like the texture and like the placement of things. And so I kind of went for like this old-timey, almost kind of like a wholesome pinup of kind of like a stamp design. I had a lot of fun painting this little border background element, so much so that it kind of inspired like what I think it would be like really fun to do, like a series of illustrations in this vintage style. I feel like I really struggle with finding a style, despite like my drawing style, which I feel like I have a good feeling for, but in terms of like the genre of what I draw or what I make. I was kind of browsing through my Instagram earlier today, and I was just like kind of reflecting on like the fact that my Instagram profile is incredibly inconsistent and really just kind of all over the place. I've got like really cute graphic, like cartoony things, or I've got more rendered realistic character things, or I've got like ceramics, which have been really fun, but there's no consistency. There's no like known color palette that really screams like, oh, that's like Megan Kim, like she does that color palette, or like, you know, that kind of thing. So like, I mean, you shouldn't do this, but when I compare myself to like other artists on Instagram and I see the success of like their thing, like their color palette, like their style or genre of work that they do, I kind of like look at myself and ask like, what do you like to do? And I like to do a whole lot of things. So anyway, I digress. But yeah, overall, like I felt like I was really happy with the genre, or like the theme that I chose for this month, which is like this vintage food packagey, really fun thing, because it's got a lot of things that I like, which is drawing cute characters and food. So yeah, I really hope you like this painting and a little bit about my process. And I really hope you join my Patreon for July, because this painting is so cute. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!